let's see a concrete example of how we can do error handling with option. Let's say that we want to define a function, getMovieHighlight, which takes a movie and returns a string with a highlight of that movie. Now, movie is defined as an object that has a title, a release year, a rating position, and an optional award. So if we have the imaginary movie The Kingdom of Monads, which was released in 2023, has the first rating position, and has been awarded with an Oscar, when we call getMovieHighlight, we want to get back a highlight that says awarded with Oscar. On the other hand, if we have a movie that has no award but is in the top 10, when we call getMovieHighlight, we want to get back a highlight that says in top 10 at position followed by the rating position, which in this case is 3. Finally, if we have a movie that has no award and it is not in the top 10, when we call getMovieHighlight, we want to show a simple highlight that says released in followed by the release year, which in this case is 2023. Now that we have an understanding of how getMovieHighlight should work, let's try to implement it. To start, we can pipe the movie into getMovieAwardHighlight, which would return the award highlight if the movie has an award. GetMovieAwardHighlight is a function that takes a movie and returns an option string. So here we just pipe movie.award, which is a string or undefined, into option from nullable and get back an option string. Then we map the award into the award highlight. So the result is an option string which holds the award highlight. Returning back to getMovieHighlight, after we piped the movie into getMovieAwardHighlight and got back an option string, we should essentially check if the option is none, and if so, try to alternatively get the top 10 highlight by using getMovieTop10Highlight. We can define getMovieTop10Highlight as a function that takes a movie and returns an option string. So here we pipe the movie into option.FromPredicate, where the predicate checks if the rating position is less than or equal to 10, and so get back an option movie, which holds a movie that is in top 10. Then we map that movie into the top 10 highlight, so the result is an option string, which holds the top 10 highlight. Returning back to getMovieHighlight, how can we actually do error handling? That is, how can we perform an alternative computation like getMovieTop10Highlight only when the option is none? This is where option.alt comes in. Option.alt takes a fallback function that performs an alternative computation which returns another option. This alternative computation is executed only when the received option is none. Therefore, returning back to getMovieHighlight, we can perform getMovieTop10Highlight as an alternative computation by using option.alt. However, even after performing that alternative computation, we still have an option string to deal with. So at this point, we want to extract the option value, which is either an award highlight or a top 10 highlight. We can do that using option.getOrElse and specify released in release year as a fallback value. So the final output is just a string, which is what we wanted. Now, let's see what actually happens step by step when we call getMovieHighlight with the first movie, which has the Oscar award. First, we pipe the movie into getMovieAwardHighlight. Inside getMovieAwardHighlight, we pipe movie.award, which is the string Oscar, into option from nullable and get back some Oscar. Then, we map award into the string awarded with award and get back some awarded with Oscar, which is the final output that this function returns. Returning to getMovieHighlight, we have some awarded with Oscar as the output of getMovieAwardHighlight. We then pipe that into alt, which simply returns back the option that it received since it's already a sum. Finally, we pipe our option into getOrElse, which returns the option's value, that is, the string awarded with Oscar, which is the final output that we get. Let's also see what happens when we call getMovieHighlight with the second movie, which has no award but is in the top 10. So we pipe the movie into getMovieAwardHighlight. Inside getMovieAwardHighlight, we pipe movie.award, which is undefined, into option from nullable and get back none. Then, when we attempt to map that none, we get back none since there is nothing to map. So the final output is none. Returning to getMovieHighlight, we have none as the output of getMovieAwardHighlight. We then pipe that into alt, which this time performs the alternative computation. get movie top 10 highlight. Inside get movie top 10 highlight, we pipe the movie into option from predicate, where the predicate checks if the rating position is less than or equal to 10, which in this case it is, since it is 3, so we get back some movie. Then we map that movie into the string in top 10 at position, rating position, and get back some in top 10 at rating position 3, which is the final output of this function. Returning to get movie highlight, we have some in top 10 at rating position 3 as the output of the alternative computation. We then pipe that into get or else, which returns the option's value, that is the string in top 10 at rating position 3, which is the final output that we get. Finally, let's see what happens when we call get movie highlight with the third movie, which has no award and is not in the top 10. So we pipe the movie into get movie award highlight, which returns none, in the same way as we saw for the previous movie, since the movie.award is undefined. We then pipe that none into alt, which performs the alternative computation get movie top 10 highlight. Inside get movie top 10 highlight, we pipe the movie into option from predicate, which this time returns none, since the movie's rating position is 74, which is greater than 10. Then, when we attempt to map that none, we get back none, which is the final output. Returning to get movie highlight, we have none as the output of the alternative computation. We then pipe that into get or else, which this time returns the fallback string released in movie.release year, which results in released in 2023, which is the final output that we get. Also note that alt forces your alternative computation to return an option with a value that has the same type as the value wrapped by the original option. So if you have an option number, your alternative computation must return an option number. Otherwise, you would get an error if you try to return a different type, like option string. If for whatever reason you want your alternative computation to return an option with a different type, you can use alt-w, where the W stands for widening, to indicate that we're widening the return type. So in this case, you would get back an option number or string.